Okay, let's try that again. All right.
Like a corporate site?
So that's more corporate. All right. Someone want to suggest a content site? Favorite blog? Yeah. Sure. That one. There we go. Okay. And web app, startup, mobile app.
I have a crazy one that I really love.
Sure.
I think it's called KennedyandOswald.com.
Kennedy. This is a conspiracy.
Killing Kennedy.
Kennedy and Oswald.
It might not be.
National Geographic? All right.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Let's try that one. Okay. All right. So we'll start here. So the first thing, from a UX perspective, the first thing you always want to think about is audience. Who is this site intended for? And if you're acting as a contractor or a vendor to somebody, let's say you're freelancing, I think a lot of you are looking at going into that sort of path, there's often a battle to separate the person who owns the website from the audience the website's going to be for. So if this is a small company, for example, the CEO is going to have all kinds of preferences about their website. They don't like the color red. They like big pictures. They don't like pictures of people. They like pictures of people. None of that is important because the only people who matter are the people who are coming to the website. A real challenge as a vendor or a contractor is getting people to understand that this website's not actually for them. It's for the audience that it's going to be for. Yeah, ideally, the people that you're trying to get to do something on the site, right? So if we look at this website, the first question is, what does push science do? Modern retail experiences, mobile and socially connected consumers have exceedingly high expectations of customer services. Retailers are failing to keep pace. Modern solutions to modernize the retail experience. So if you had to guess just based on that, who's this site for? Retailers? Yeah, I would think retailers would be high on that list. I didn't pay somebody to tweet that as I was standing here, I promise. I would quit Twitter. All right. So beautiful user interface design, integration-focused architecture. What does integration-focused architecture mean? Anyone? Yeah, I have no idea. What is CEM? Mobile CEM. So always think about scannability. People don't read websites, they scan them. They'll come back and read them if they think the website is important. So if I'm looking at this website and I'm sort of scanning, you do the 30-second test. I land on this website, I'm going to spend less than 30 seconds figuring out if this site is relevant to me at all. So if you scan this page and you look for things that stand out, you're going to see modern retail experiences, beautiful user interface design, integration-focused architecture, not really sure what that is, and then you're going to see mobile CEM. If you miss this part here, customer experience management, you're not going to know what mobile CEM is, but because that's what's in bold, you're going to see it down here. Maybe that's a term that means something to people in the retail space. I'm not in the retail space, so I'm not sure. So who needs push science? Communication service providers. So I guess retailers? That may be an industry-specific term. That's the challenge in doing something like this when we're not in the industry. That, if you were, you might actually know that. I guess we'll click mail too. Which I guess we can put ourselves on. Visually, it's a very appealing website. Very simple, lots of white space, very clean, doesn't feel very cluttered. Okay, so at a very quick scan through this, can anybody tell me what they do? Look, it looks like an app from here, right?
I would guess they have some kind of platform that allows retailers to interact with their customers. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds right. Let's see what.
I don't know what scientific.
That
name is the word describing.
Yeah.
push science.
I thought they were going to be like teaching kids about science.
Yeah, me too. I was really like this, like
Okay, so this page actually tells us more about it, right? Mobile customer acquisition tool for communication service providers. I like this. Facts are always useful. They validate the website. It makes people think, okay, yeah, there's some science behind this beyond just the name. Okay, so what I'm looking for when I scan a page, we should see if, oh, I guess I'm in full screen mode. We should, you can sort of test responsiveness by scrolling, by sailing a page. You guys have started building responsive stuff, so that'll work if they've built this responsive, which they have, which is nice. That won't work if they're doing any sort of browser detection to see if they should be serving up a mobile version, because we're still showing up as a desktop browser, but it'll work for at least for sort of testing to see if it's responsive. So it looks like they've done at least some optimization, which is nice. So the things that I'm looking for on a home page, particularly for a corporate site, is who is this for? If I'm landing on this page, depending on where I'm coming from, that's the first thing I'm trying to figure out in that 30-second test. Is this site even relevant to me? Then the second thing is, what do they actually do? So why do I care about this? The question that we often ask when we're designing pages is the what's in it for me question. If I'm the audience and I'm coming here, what do I get out of this service provider or this experience? And it's actually the second page that we looked at, it's much clearer what I get out of this and who it's for on this page than it is on their homepage. Now, what we don't know when we're looking at a third-party site is how do they get traffic here? So if they're doing something like a whole lot of search engine marketing on keywords, they may be driving directly to this page rather than their homepage, in which case the payoff may actually be better because you'd get a higher conversion rate if people were landing here and you had driven them here based on an ad for mobile customer acquisition tool or something like that. We don't know that because we don't know how they're driving traffic. The other thing we don't know too is there may be more landing pages here that we're not seeing. There is a blog. Quite often companies will use their blog and they'll write content. This is hard to read. Ooh, yeah. Yeah. If only I knew a whole bunch of web developers. So something like this, for example, 8 studies that reveal how shoppers use smartphones in stores. Like this page is actually much nicer layout than the index page. Something like this may actually act as a landing page. They might be driving traffic to this through a search engine marketing campaign, getting people on here. What you always want to see on pages like that, though, is a very clear call to action. This is too far down the page. So if I was using this as a landing page, I'd want a sidebar or something that was going to convert people who were landing here to getting in touch with us. So if you look at the home page, it doesn't entirely pass the test of what's in it for me or who's this for, but I sort of get it. Certainly if I scroll down. What's missing here, other than this request a demo button, though, is a clear call to action. How am I converting people once they land on this page? So have you guys talked at all about conversion funnels or no? Okay, so if you think about so this gets a little bit outside of web design, but it's something to think about, especially if you're working with smaller businesses. Getting people to the site is only one part of the challenge, right? If you think about a conversion funnel like this, which has multiple steps along it, getting people to the website, so getting people to here, is the top of this funnel. The left of the funnel, I guess. You can draw it the other way, it would be the top. So you have lots of different ways to get people to a website, right? So you could hand somebody a business card, it has the URL on it, they type it in, they come to the website. You could run a search engine marketing campaign, you could have links off of other sites, lots of ways, social media, all that kind of stuff. Those are going to get people to a website. The question is what happens here? What's that first conversion step? In this case, they're trying to get you to request a demo. So we could call this request a demo, and now what we're trying to do is convert by getting people to click on that button. There isn't a ton of other stuff that it's obvious that I can do on this page, so that's probably their primary goal. If it's their primary goal, it's very far down the page. It's hard to get people all the way down here. It's nice that the button stands out, that's great, but it's hard to get people all the way down there and getting them to click on that. So anybody else who browses this page is sort of left to figure out the next action on their own. They might go to the contact section, or they might phone you. It's not all that clear what you want to do. If you're going to get into going a step beyond just sort of building sites and you want to get into optimization, if you're going to start to do any sort of optimization testing like A/B testing where you're trying different variations to see what the conversion rate is, you want to test those calls to action and you want to try moving them up the page, moving them down the page, making the button bigger or a different color, or playing around with different ways to see how you're going to get people to do the action you want to do. So as an example of that, this is the book that I just wrote with some of my colleagues, and so this is our website for the book, and we're actually testing a whole bunch of different variations of this right now. So we've landed on one of those tests because the software behind here has picked to put us in a test condition. And so the one that we're trying here is what happens if we ask people for their email address right off the bat, rather than just trying to get them to buy the book. So if you think about the conversion funnel, for us, it might be a difference between if the first step is sign up to our newsletter versus buy our book. For them, and then we do get other calls to action further down the page. So you can see the red buy now button. You can see some tools that you can use. There's lots of different ways out of here. But the primary call to action in this test is sign up to the email. On their page, the call to action seems to be request a demo or get in touch, but it's not all that obvious what they want you to do. A lot of companies, and I don't know much about push signs, although they seem to be based in Toronto. A lot of companies consider their website almost table stakes. You have to have a corporate website. They don't put a lot of thought into the site beyond just building it. It is what we've called for a long time brochureware. It replaces the brochure that they would have had in days before. It's just been built into a website instead. And that might work fine for them. All they really needed was a website that they could send people to. If they're not doing a whole lot of activities to drive people into a funnel and they're not trying to convert them, usually the end of this is dollars, right? Okay, great, we got a customer. So if you think about conversion, each step here where we convert from here to here and then when we convert from here to here has a drop-off rate. If you're doing anywhere between, say, 7 to 10% conversion on that first, you're doing really, really well. So you have to assume that the vast majority of traffic that lands on this page is never going to convert to anything. And you're going to have a drop-off rate as you go through here, and you're going to get down to this number at the end. So if you're advising a small business and they're setting up a website like this, if all they want is a brochure or a site, you don't really have to think about all this stuff. You can just build the site. Probably not a great investment on their behalf, but if that's what they're looking for and they just want to check the box that says they have a website, that's okay. But if they're serious about making the site work for them, you do have to start to think about things like this. Your funnel may not be this long. It may only have 1 or 2 steps in it. But especially if they're going to spend money driving traffic there, if they're going to do search engine marketing or any way of paying to get traffic to their website, this allows you to figure out what that's worth at the end. So let's say, for example, they're doing search engine marketing, and let's say that, just to make math easy, they're paying $5 to get somebody to the website. If you figure out what the drop-off rate is, and then you figure out what the lifetime value for this customer is, so let's say that their software looks like it could be fairly expensive. Let's say the lifetime value of a customer for them is $10,000. You can figure out how many $5 customers or $5 site visitors you're gonna have to drive in before it's no longer worth it at the end. That's part of this sort of thinking about the overall mentality of doing this. We're getting way off of web design, but I think it's probably useful to think about it. So if I look at this website through that filter, it's probably not paying for itself. It's probably closer to the brochureware end of the spectrum than it is a tool that's driving customer acquisition. If you're working with a lot of smaller, like this looks like it might be fairly expensive, but if you're working with a smaller business, let's say, for example, a hair salon, their lifetime customer is not worth that much to them unless that's somebody that really starts to come back on a regular basis. Even then, the cost per visit is pretty low. You'd have to come back a lot before you start to get into the $10,000 range. So it's probably not worth it to them to do really expensive search engine marketing to drive traffic. But they might benefit from really hyper-local targeting because they're really only looking for people who are around them. The more local you make your targeting when you're buying traffic, the cheaper it becomes. So it may still be worth them considering that. And you're in a position to advise them. Even if you're not doing this stuff, there's lots of consultants out there that can do the search engine marketing side, but you can help them to understand what the costs might look like And also just think about that on their website. If this was, for example, a hair salon, I would want a button that's all about booking an appointment really high up on the page so I can start to convert people when they're coming there and getting them to actually do that.
So I have a question. This is more about us as developers, because there's a lot of us that want to do freelance.
Sure.
After the program is finished, what would you consider the must-have call to action, and in what order would you push on personal sites? Because we'll have like
Right.
the one-liner at the top, and then it'll maybe go into an about page, and then go into
Right.
work that we've done, and then maybe a contact us now. But is that necessarily the right order to be doing it?
Yeah, so let's talk about a web designer site. I would come back to the question, what's in it for me? So let's say I was thinking about hiring a web firm, freelance designer or a small agency. I'm a local business. I need somebody to build a website for me. Unless I get referrals from friends, the most typical thing to do is search in Google. So if I go to Google, let's see what happens. If I go to Google and I say Toronto web designer, yeah, let's switch to Google. That's going to give us more local results. So I'm going to see a bunch of ads, right? That's not surprising. There's lots of agencies that are buying ads around web design. And then I'm going to see some results up at the top here. Let's just pick one at random. I hope I'm not about to offend anybody in the room, but right. Wow. Is this Flash? That'd be awesome. No. At least it's not Flash. So when I land on this page, you can do this exercise for yourself, or you can ask a friend, right? If you've got a friend who owns a small company, even if they're not going to hire you, but you want to sort of get their view on what they're looking for. When they land on this page, they're asking the question, what's in it for me? So the question in this case is, what's going to sell me on Web Design 1 as my web shop versus all of the other sites that I'm going to look at? I probably went through at least the first page of search results. Here, let's open some tabs. We'll skip that one because that's Shopify store designers. Okay, so silence. No comment. That looks broken. That still looks broken. Okay, so the first thing that I'm thinking about as I'm looking, this is basic marketing. What is your unique value proposition? You're sitting in a room full of people. You guys all like each other very much. You spent a whole bunch of time together, but you're going to leave here and a bunch of you are going to become freelancers, which essentially makes you competitors. No, I'm about to turn the entire class against each other. Watch as I undo everything that's been done over the last 7 weeks. So when you leave here and you start thinking about your website design to promote your services, what makes you stand out from your competitors? These guys certainly stand out. I don't know whether they stand out in a way that's going to convert people to hiring them, but you're going to remember this website compared to the other ones. This is just a lot of stuff. And also, they're promoting websites with things that aren't websites, which is a little weird. So, this is pretty clean. I can see they do websites. They obviously think about mobile, tablets, that's good. I'm going to look in a portfolio. I want to see what kind of work they've done. Ideally, I want to recognize some of the companies here. Not always the case. That's fine as long as the work is really good. They're going with the shock and awe client list here. It works, right? They've obviously done a lot of work before. That makes me feel a little bit better about hiring them because they've done a ton of work in the past. They've picked a couple projects to feature here. I like that I can do a really quick look and see what the designs look like. They look pretty clean. Well, let's not hire them then. But what's going to make them stand out for me? And that's what I sort of come back to on your question, right? When somebody lands on the homepage of your new web design portfolio, what's the thing that's really going to make you stand out? It could be really great work that you've done, but the truth is that everybody out there that's selling websites has done pretty good work or is going to show off their best pieces of work. And we all know, certainly if you've worked with clients before, the design work that you do at the beginning is not the website that's going to come out the end. By the time the client gets involved, if we could do this job without clients, it would be awesome. But we can't. So you're going to do a beautiful design. By the time it goes through the client and all the revisions, and then you're going to get those crazy calls where the client's like, I showed it to my daughter and she really doesn't like the color green. Can we replace it with blue? I've had that call. By the time it comes out the other end, you may not be as proud of it as you were when it started. So what you put up on your website needs to be examples. I can actually go to this website from here. It's got to kind of match what I saw here. Otherwise, it doesn't look like it was your work. So you're going to pick your best pieces that you're most proud of. You're going to put them up there. Everybody's got a portfolio of work. What really makes you stand out? It might be that you do a particular type of design, right? Let's say that, we'll stick with hair salons. Let's say that you're really a specialist in hair salon design. That's a great, unique value proposition. That's going to help people when they land there to say, okay, if I'm looking for somebody to design my hair salon website, this person really knows what they're doing. Or something to think about, it was in the search results here. There are lots of, I know you guys I think you're about to get into WordPress. Or you're in it. I love WordPress. I've spent years building stuff on top of WordPress. There's a great market for WordPress customization. There's a great market for Shopify store customization. In all of these cases, you're learning how to build a theme package. Shopify themes are not radically different than WordPress themes. They're not compatible. You can't take a WordPress theme and put it on Shopify, but it's the same basic idea. You're working with a lot of CSS, some images, the basic pages that they give you, and you're going to customize it. There's an increasing market for doing things like this because people want to set up online stores or they want to set up corporate sites that include a blog. And this is really nice because they've given you an index. Shopify is an awesome company. They're actually based in Ottawa, so they're actually a Canadian company. But they've set up an index here of Toronto designers that specify in Shopify sites. And they've included pricing, which is actually really nice when you're looking at this. So you can sort of see, starts at $425 for a project, $85 an hour. Starts at $5,000, $130 an hour. Going to be a little bit more expensive, right? This is a good unique selling proposition or unique value proposition because if I'm looking for somebody who knows Shopify themes, my market just got a lot narrower. So if I go to this is a really nice directory. I hadn't seen this before. So you can see what they do, some reviews. And so speaking of unique value proposition, right? If I just landed on their website, they specialize in growing e-commerce businesses. That's great because they've narrowed their field. If I land here and I'm an e-commerce store, I'm going to feel better about hiring them than a general web design studio because they know the intricacies of e-commerce. It may feel like you're narrowing your field of customers by doing that, but you're actually going to sell more easily. So it's a trade-off there. A lot of small businesses or freelancers, when they start, try to take on any kind of client that they can. You may have to do that just to keep the lights on, and that's okay at the beginning. But the more that you can start to specialize, the more you're going to find unique opportunities to sell your services where you can stand out more. I don't know if that was a really long answer to your question. I have no idea. So we finished beating up on push science. Any other questions on this? We move on to the next one. Yeah. Yes.
It's actually very good for you. I actually designed and developed the site. But everything you're saying is exactly true because it started with like a 30-page Word document.
Right.
This is what needs to go on the website, and it's
right.
a constant battle with your clients, being like, no one is going to read this. And you're exactly right in saying that all of their business comes from pages you cannot see that are funneled through ads.
Right. So and that is increasingly common in building sites. And actually, it's the right way to build them. So dumping people onto a homepage after you've paid to acquire them is a terrible idea. The homepage has to exist for everybody that lands there. What you want to do when you've paid to acquire somebody, whatever context you paid to acquire them in, is what you want to serve up when they land on the website. The homepage can never serve that purpose because it has to appeal to everybody. So if you think about the old sort of model of building a website, I know I'd be enough conversation.
No, that's good.
The old model of building a website was, so if this is your homepage, right? So the way we used to think about websites was like everybody came in here, and then there were a bunch of pages that came off of that, and sometimes people went to those other pages. But that's how we used to think about websites. And a lot of people still think about them that way. Unfortunately, those people are often their clients. So what they're thinking about their website is, what does the homepage look like? The truth is, more traffic comes into these pages often than the homepage, because these are the pages that show up in Google search results. And if you're driving traffic to them through ads, you're not driving people here, you're driving them here. So when you're thinking about website design, yeah, this is a really important page, but it's not the most important page. And if you're paying to acquire traffic, if you're doing this, then these pages may actually be way more important because they're the top of the conversion funnel. People are still going to get to the homepage at some point. You don't want an ugly homepage that doesn't appeal. But if the majority of your traffic is coming through ads and it's getting driven to landing pages that are specific to that, these are the ones that you really want to pay attention to and spend the most time on. Now, if you've got a client who doesn't believe you, and that happens a lot, there are ways to convince them that that's the case. So depending on the budget that they've got available to them, there are some really great usability testing services. I think. No. Maybe? No. User testing. Yeah. We used to use user testing a lot. So you see we've just landed on a landing page, right? This is not user testing's homepage. They just paid to acquire us because I clicked on one of their ads. And so rather than, and I because I was actually just looking at them, I didn't even read this, but your user testing score, how does the user experience of your site measure up? Find out how, or find out now. Rather than getting to their homepage, which we can see, very different page, we landed on a landing page, and this is really optimized to get me to sign up. So it's telling me that they're going to measure my user experience, and then I can request my score by filling this in. It's very clear, single call to action, very big green button, hard to miss, all above the fold, so there's no scrolling on this page. I don't need to scroll down to read anything else. This is probably a pretty effective landing page. I would hope it is because they're in the business of user testing, so if this isn't an effective landing page, they're not doing a good job. You can also see if you look up in the URL here, we have a whole bunch of UTM variables that get passed in by Google. Those are set by user testing when they buy that ad. So this allows them in their Google Analytics to figure out where I came from when I got here and to measure the effectiveness of different campaigns. So I came from Google, my medium was cost per click, and then they've labeled the content. So this is what they've decided this page is called, and the campaign is around this campaign. That'll all get grouped together in their analytics, and so they can measure how effective different pages are being at converting. But what I wanted to show you here is, let me play the video.
What's the experience like on your website or app?
Oh, guys, you got no Zoom again. That's terrible.
So this is actually what you get.
Stitching.
And it's really not actually all that expensive. What happens is you go and you create a test. You say who you're looking for demographically. You can see some information about this tester. He's an expert. He's on a PC. He's in London. What his salary is, how old he is. You define who you want to have testing. You give them a task. Then they farm that out to their network of testers around the world. They run screen recorders. They go through and do the task that you've asked them to do. You get the screen recordings back, which is great because if your client doesn't believe you, there's no better way to prove it to them than to show them a bunch of users not figuring out their website, right? So if we look at Push Science, for example, and I promise I'll stop beating up on it in a second.
I'm going to send this video recording to them.
The challenge in this site might be that you're not going to get the audience you're looking for on user testing because it's actually a very specific audience, right? You're looking for a particular type of customer. But on a more general website or a more general consumer website, user testing can work really effectively. The way the pricing is you buy packages of credits, or they may have changed this since the last time I used it, but yeah, so you buy packages of credits. You can buy a package, it'll get them cheaper, but this is $50 a user to run a test. So it's not completely inexpensive, but if you've got a client who's willing to say, okay, let's spend $500 of our budget on some user testing, you're not going to get a single participant in person for a $500 budget, but you're going to get 10 users through here. That's not bad. The one thing we learned about running tests through here when I used it in the past is pay attention to when you kick off the tests, because if you do what most people do, which is spend a day at work, get your test all ready to go, and then hit the button and leave, the people who do the test are in a different time zone because they run the test as soon as you hit the button, and the people who are now available to do testing are going to be in Europe or on the West Coast. So just think about when you hit the button because you may get people in a completely different place. However, if you kick them off in the morning or you specify the geography, you can actually do that. So $50 a user is a pretty cheap way to prove your point, which is what this gets used for a lot. But also if you're trying to decide between different things, this is a pretty good way of doing it. Most of the sites that you work on aren't going to have enough traffic coming to them to really use something like an A/B testing framework. There are some really great ones out there. I'm a big fan of, I can't spell it, but I'm a big fan of Optimizely. Optimizely is a great A/B testing tool. I love this page. Like, you can't get simpler for a landing page than that. That's it. So we can put a URL in here. Since we're beating up on Wes, we'll keep beating up on Wes. Right, so you actually have to create an account here. I won't, it's okay. You guys can play with this one on your own. It's essentially what it allows you to do is, you can see it in the background here. So it will create variations of this page, and then it will split your traffic to you drop some JavaScript on your site. It will split your traffic to the site into the variations, and then report back on which one converts the best. So if we were to take this site and actually sign up for an account, we could create multiple variations. They've got a really nice HTML editor in here that's aware of the structure behind this. So I can pick a div in here and then replace the text, and that becomes a different variation. So what I might try, for example, is what happens if I move that request a demo button up higher. That's one of my variations. I drop my JavaScript on my page. This runs automatically for me, reports back on which one's converting higher. Really effective tool. The only challenge with it is you have to have a reasonable amount of traffic to the site before you can funnel enough traffic into the variations to get to any kind of real statistical significance. Now, I used to use this at Ripple when I was the head of marketing there. We didn't care about statistical significance. I don't like anybody was going to come back and audit our testing and be like, oh, the sample size wasn't large enough to prove anything. Because often what happens is one of them is clearly better than the other. And so you don't actually need to get to a full, test before you can say, okay, great, we proved our point. You can say, look, the trend is clear. This one is way outperforming the other one. We're just going to go with this one. So something like Optimizely can help in that. User testing can also help in that, improving that. Okay. So let's leave the poor Toronto web development community alone, and we'll give Wes a break. And let's talk about a completely different site. Any questions on yeah. Yes.
How do you take and push down your content and communicate to them that nobody cares?
Right. So it's a great question because every client thinks that their business is the most important thing on the planet. They have to. They're small business owners, right? And if they don't think that way, their business isn't going to survive. But the truth is nobody else really cares all that much about it. The best way to do that is tell them how much it's going to cost them to put 30 pages of content on their website. Because once they see the price, that's the best argument against doing it. It's going to be really expensive to build a site with 30 pages. Are you sure you want to do it? And they say, well, how much are we talking about? And you give them a number and they go, oh, wow, no, yeah, I definitely don't want to do that. And then you say, you know what? Why don't we do this? We can take a phased approach. I love the term phased approach because clients think that you're talking about something really scientific. And you say, look, it's going to take us a long time to build a website that's got 30 pages of content on it. You're not going to have a website in market for a much longer period of time. Why don't we do this? Let's pick the most important few pages, get the website up, and then afterwards we can keep adding content to it. They're never going to come back and have you add more content to it, especially if you invoice them for the first part of the website, because then they're going to have to start paying you again to do the rest of it. So it's a really effective way to manage the client. I always think about it as sort of like jujitsu. The difference of, and I don't really practice martial arts, but the difference of jujitsu is you use your opponent's weight and momentum against them. So if you can turn a client around and use them against themselves, it's the best way to manage the client. And you know that the one thing that they're not going to want to do is pay you more than they need to. So just make it more expensive to do the thing that you don't want to do. Works almost every time. And the great part about it is the very few times when it doesn't work, the client's now paying you more money. So actually it's not such a bad thing if, you know. I had some advice very early in my career. Anytime a client asks you how much something costs, just tell them $1 million. Because it's a great icebreaker and everybody has a laugh about it, but there's a very small chance that somebody's just going to say yes. So, okay, so the BBC radio website. Now the BBC is a weird example when you're looking at it because they don't have to make money, which means that they also don't have to think about getting people to pay for things. And because they have really great content that they make available for free, people are willing to put up with more stuff from them than they would be in other cases. Everybody does a calculation when they land on a website, particularly if they're thinking about buying something or interacting with something. I think of it as a risk-reward calculation. You always do risk-reward calculations all the time. You don't even think about the fact that you're doing it, but you do it all the time. The risk-reward calculation usually on a website is, this seems like it's going to take up a lot of my time. That's the risk. What's the reward I'm going to get out of it? Well, in this case, you're going to get access to some really great free content. Really great free content is very rewarding, so you're willing to invest more time. If you think about some of the other websites we looked at, especially when you land on them and they seem really overwhelming and there's a lot of text and you got to read it, the risk is I'm going to spend a lot of time, it's not worth it. The reward, it doesn't seem that high. I close the browser tab and I move on. So that's why you have about 30 seconds to convert somebody. So normally, if this was a company that was paying me to look at this and they were trying to get people to sign up, I would say this is a terrible homepage. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not really sure what it is. There's a lot of text. The contrast is really sharp, so it's hard to read it. I don't even know what the call to action is. But they don't care about any of that because their content is so great that people are willing to invest the time to figure out what they're looking at and where they should spend their attention. You're never going to have a client like that unless they're the BBC. Not even the CBC, because they actually have a mandate to make money. So they have a very different approach. So this website may be a bit of an exception from that perspective. But all the same, let's take a look at it. So you've got a nice structure here in that you've got stations, categories, feature content, and most popular, which kind of matches my nav bar at the top. You've also got what feels like it's probably a BBC standard header here. Yeah. So that's nice because you're within the universe of BBC content, and it anchors you within that universe. You always know that you can go to the top and get to news or sport or weather. I'm not sure what capital is, but so you've got that up here. Search, almost always top right corner. It's what people have come to expect. You can move it into other places on the page, but they're going to have trouble finding it. In fact, that's such a strong bias towards the top right corner that if you put other text boxes there, people will type search terms in them. So if you put a sign-up box there for email addresses for a newsletter, people will use it like a search box, which is hilarious and awesome at the same time. So if you're doing a site that's got search, unless you got a really strong reason for not putting it in the top right, I would stick it in the top right corner. Something that they're doing that's nice here is using size to indicate importance. So as you get further down the page, things get smaller. That's a useful way of showing people where to focus their attention. We naturally focus our attention on bigger things. We also focus on things that have pictures in them. So in this case, you've got these pictures here. That's going to be your focus, especially on a black background. It makes the pictures pop out. But they're also bigger than what comes underneath them. And so when you get down to here, where you've got the fat footer at the bottom, you get a lot of really small elements. Just visually, that helps you to sort of see the importance of them. A useful test for figuring out what's going to attract your attention on the page is to squint and look at the page. The things that still stand out are going to get people's attention. This I worked with a designer who used to print everything he was working on, even if it was online, and then turn it upside down. He maintained that when you break your mind out of the construct of this being a web page and you make it a bit more abstract, it's easier to see what people are going to focus on naturally. It's sort of effective. You can certainly try it. When we were looking at the push site before, the nice thing here was a really big picture that attracted your attention. So you know where people's attention is going to go on this page. This page is a bit more of a mess from that perspective, but you're going to get attention on these four pictures here definitely. Lots of sites these days are using carousels to try and cram more content into the area that people are looking at. So what I mean by carousels, I'm just trying to think if I think of a site that has one on it off the top of my head, but yeah, this one's actually just more annoying than anything else, but it's rotating through content. Usually with carousels, actually, we have one on our website, just because we were looking at it before. So there's a carousel here, and you can go through different people that have said things about the book, and it's also responsive. So if you're on a responsive device, you can swipe through this. I'm not a fan of them. That's not a great example because it doesn't have a picture in it, but they've become the way that people solve the problem of what goes in the hero real estate on the website by putting more stuff in the hero real estate, which is not actually solving the problem. It's just putting more stuff there. The truth is, nobody interacts with carousels. If you look at the analytics on a page, if you've instrumented the page so you're tracking the interaction with that, you'll get very, very low usage of the arrow buttons on either side, and people don't hang around long enough to make it through a cycle of content on them. So my feeling is they're not a great solution to the problem. They tend to come up, especially if you're working with a client that has multiple stakeholders. If you're working with a small business that has one owner, you've only got one person to deal with, which is great. If you work on a project that has lots of stakeholders, like lots of departments within a company, the challenge becomes that mentality of the homepage is the most important thing will persist through the entire company, and everyone within the company will want their content on the homepage because the homepage is the most important thing. And so you'll end up in this battle for space because the more prominent it is, the more prominent their department is, and then you end up with carousels because people say, oh, well, here's the solution. We'll just put it all in here and we'll just make people scroll through it on the website. So people aren't going to really do that. So you're sort of getting that a bit with the stations there. And then nothing else here is doing that. So they've picked what they're going to feature elsewhere. We built the website for the hospital for sick kids. It may actually still be the same. So yeah, this is actually still the same site. There's a lot of departments in the hospital for sick kids, it turns out, especially when you count that they have the research arm, the learning arm, and the foundation. This just turned into a battle over homepage real estate. That's all this project was. And we spent more time getting departments to stop fighting with each other over turf on the homepage than we did actually designing the website. It was entirely a political battle. That's what happens, especially in nonprofits. The sad advice that I would give you is the clients who pay you the least are the biggest pain in the ass. I don't know why that works, but it just tends to be the case. We used to do, when I ran Radiant Core, we liked doing pro bono work and nonprofit work. They were the worst clients. I think it's because they've probably been treated the worst as well. So they've historically built up this, everybody looks at them and say, well, you're not paying me that much, so you're at the bottom of my priority list. I'm never going to get to the things you've asked me to do. They build up this natural reaction. So I found, like, when I started as a freelancer in my career, my instinct was, hey, maybe I'll do some nonprofit work. Don't do the nonprofit work. This wasn't nonprofit, but it was still a bit of a pain. You had a question, yeah.
What's your opinion on black background with white text? I think some feedback about that, how it's not really good. But I see it.
I don't have a strong feeling either way. It creates a different feeling than a white background does, right? There's legibility studies that say that we're more inclined. It's easier to read black text on a white background than it is to read anything else. One thing to keep in mind as a designer is that not only is your client not the audience for the website, but you're also not the audience for the website. And that's a hard thing as a designer because we want to design things that we like and find visually appealing. Now, what tends to happen, if you look around the room, you're all young, you've got pretty good eyesight, you're going to design things that people who are older than you can't read. It happens all the time, especially if you lighten the color of text on a background. When you do your own design work, odds are you probably prefer a shade of gray rather than pure black text. It happens a lot. You also probably prefer a font size that's smaller. When you put that in front of clients, especially if they're older clients or if their audience is older clients, they're not going to be able to read it as much. So you have to think about the fact that you're not actually the audience for the site. what you find really visually appealing may not work at all. It's a hard separation to make. So you might love the look of this website, but if you're designing, let's say, a website for home care for the elderly, this is probably the wrong direction to go in. You probably want big black text on a white background. It's not going to look as great. It's not going to look as cool, definitely, but it's going to do a better job with the audience. So it's hard to make sweeping statements that say black text is better on a white background or white text on a black background. I think it's very specific to what you're designing for, but you have to keep in mind what you're designing for. This is an interesting choice given the very broad audience of the BBC, but I think the white text on black is probably pretty legible either way. So I don't think they've got a legibility issue with it. It creates a different feeling. Even if you think if the difference between these two pages is quite significant, and they're both BBC properties. In all likelihood designed by completely different people because the BBC is so big, but very different feel between these two pages, right? Anyone else have a question on the BBC site? Yeah.
Actually, I read an article that Fairmont posted about websites with white background. They're more for like product, let's say, like productivity, and black ones like maybe for a nightclub website. It would be more for like relaxing or extreme moods, like stuff like that for fun. White backgrounds and light backgrounds are more for people who want to learn stuff or like click on stuff to like buy things. More productivity basically versus relaxation.
That makes sense, given the last example. BBC radio.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. I didn't actually mean to bring this up as a counterpoint to that, but I guess it kind of is. This is also, more leisurely. You're reading about the city. Blogto's always had a very clean look, very white, lots of white space, which is nice. It feels much more relaxed. White space tends to give people less stress. So if you land on a site that's got very little white space and lots of text packed together, it feels really cramped. You get really stressed when you look at it. Lots of white space tends to give freedom to that. Designers love white space. Clients hate it. Clients treat white space. I've never figured this one out either, but this is turning into a long rant about clients. Clients treat white space almost like they're paying for it. I've never really understood that, but it's like, I don't know, that's a lot of pixels with no content in them. That looks expensive. The pixels are all the same price. But breathing room in a design is really important. So if you look at these boxes, if there wasn't this margin, this would feel really cramped and tight. With the margin there, or the padding, depending on how they've implemented it, it's giving it a bit of space and breathing room, and it feels a lot more relaxed. Let me see if I can find...
It still feels really cramped.
Yeah, I would have made those bigger, personally, but then pixels are expensive, so...
The new Facebook changes got rid of a lot of white space in the bankers me because I find it hard to read and
Yeah.
parse the data in my Facebook feed.
Yeah.
You don't want it. But I actually think it's like a mistake to step backwards this time, not just, man, I shouldn't.
So here's an example. So if you're building websites that get into emailing people, this is really important to think about. So if you're building a website that has an email component to it, let's say there's a newsletter that goes along with the website, and you're going to lay out the newsletter as well, right? This is an email I just got from LinkedIn today. Yeah. There's no, this looks broken actually. There's no padding or margin. There's no LinkedIn logo. It's hard to read. The line length runs all the way out to the edges.
It almost seems like a spam email.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not actually. It is actually a legitimate LinkedIn message, but I mean, it looks wrong, right? Now, they're not always like that, so maybe it was actually broken. Usually LinkedIn messages look like this. You can see the difference between those. The padding and margin on the sides makes it much easier to read. There's a LinkedIn logo. I feel better receiving it. It looks a little bit better. So it's something to think about when you're designing a site that's going to, especially if it's going to have an email newsletter, right? And that happens a lot with small companies. They want to build up contact with their client base. They want an email newsletter that goes with it. You're now going to have to design for email. So the thing to remember about designing for email is everything that you've learned in this course doesn't work in email, basically, right? You basically have to treat email like Internet Explorer from 10 years ago, because that's, unfortunately, for everybody who's using Outlook, it actually uses Microsoft Word's HTML rendering engine, not Internet Explorer's. You can imagine how good Microsoft Word is at rendering HTML. Now, there are some great resources. That's a whole other topic, and I think we'll use up a lot of time if we start digging into it. But there are some really great resources online. MailChimp, if you ever end up in this situation and you have to do stuff. First of all, I love MailChimp. So if you have a client who's asking you what you should be using for email newsletters, I don't know if anybody else in the back of the room has a different opinion about. I love MailChimp. So, and for most of your clients, it will be free because their pricing is structured so that unless you get into sending out actually a fair amount of email, it's free. So MailChimp's awesome, easy to design templates for. They actually just changed their template designer inside of here. It's much easier to use now. But the other reason that I like them is, I don't remember where it is on here, but they maintain a whole bunch of information about what works in different email clients. So if you're wondering, can I put an animated GIF in here? They've got great information about what that's going to work in and what it's not. I had the question the other day, can I play video in an email? The answer, unfortunately, is no. But or the answer is yes, you can do it in some email clients. But the problem with email clients is there's no way to do browser detection. So you can't say, oh, this is Gmail, I can serve up a video, but in Outlook I have to serve up an image. You only get whatever's in there. And CSS, some CSS is supported, JavaScript isn't at all. So you basically have to design for the lowest common denominator. Let me start talking about email, because if you did a site like BlogTO, or if you did a newsletter, if you did a blog with a newsletter, you're gonna have to think about how your design translates into the email format. And so you want to think about how it's going to look. You also want to think about what functionality you need. And the good news is responsive emails are now supported in a lot of places. So you can also think about what it's going to look like on a mobile device versus a desktop. Very different email experience as well. Most email these days is actually checked on mobile devices. And we've been retargeted by Optimizely. So that's how they're generating traffic to their site. And you see we're on a different landing page than the one that we landed on before. Okay. In our remaining 9 minutes, it has sound? It's been playing here. Let's reload it. See if we get some sound.
Yeah, I start scrolling through sound. Which one?
There we go.
I have a rendezvous with.
Really nice parallax. So this is website as immersive experience. You guys, did you remember the New York Times snowfall? Yeah. Have you guys seen this? Anybody not seen it? Okay, so this project launched actually 2012. Wow. This project, probably more than any one project, redefined the way that people think about laying out long-form content on the web. This was one of the first projects that really brought new media into it. It's actually a pretty remarkable story that was written by John Branch. And somebody at the New York Times had the inspiration to turn this into something that stood out on the web. And so you get a lot of content. It is a long story, but you also get things like video that you can play.
I had No.
You get a lot of stuff like this. Some historical photos. Some nice video that just plays automatically with no sound. Never play video automatically with sound, but if it doesn't have sound in it, you can play it automatically. And then that's a nice intro. It attracts your attention, and then you can play a longer video here. Our friends at Optimizely. You get introduced to the people down the side. This is a slideshow rather than video. So you get some nice full screen pictures. So what happened after they created this? First of all, this thing went viral. The traffic to this was unbelievable. And to snowfall something has now become a verb at the New York Times. And what immediately happened was everybody else wanted their content snowfalled as well. So I actually saw a talk by the designer who did this, and it's like, it was crazy. We put it up, we didn't know what was going to happen. Millions and millions and tens of millions of visitors. Everybody wanted their editorial snowfalled, whatever that means. I could track it down again. I saw him speak at a Wired conference in New York. It helps that they have beautiful photography, which is very compelling, right? This wouldn't work nearly as effectively if these weren't great product shots, or they weren't not product shots. It probably wouldn't work at all if they were product shots, but it wouldn't work if they weren't great photos. Great photography is a real challenge. Most of your clients are going to have no photography, and they're certainly not going to have great photography. But photography changes the experience of a site, especially pictures of people. If you can get your clients to put pictures of smiling people on their websites, go for it every time. Because smiling people, we react to at a biological level. It triggers certain responses. When you land on a site with smiling people, you have a much warmer feeling about it. You're much more likely to interact with it. So smiling faces are always a good thing. Well, probably not always. I guess there are certain businesses where it's probably inappropriate, but for the most part, they're really useful. The other thing they did really nicely on here, and it's if you're building a content-heavy site, it's a good thing to keep in mind. Line length, so the individual length of each of these lines, affects how tired people get when they're reading your content. The longer the line length, the more eye movement that's involved, and the more your concentration is required to get to the end of the line. Shorter line lengths help with that a lot. It's a classic typography piece. It didn't make its way onto the web until people who knew typography started doing web layout. So although this feels a little weird because there's a lot of white space here, this is a really long article, and without that it would be really exhausting to read. With that, it's actually not nearly as tiring to read. You get that a lot on blog sites, but they do it for a different reason, right? It's because they want to fit a sidebar on here with a whole bunch of additional content. The nice side effect is the line length isn't that long, but this is not nearly as relaxing to read as this is. You can tell just by looking at the two. So if you're doing a lot of really long content, that's definitely worth thinking about. Yeah. So this is almost, I don't remember when this came out in 2012, but it's almost 2 years old now. And this was one of the real beginnings of moving to a much richer layout. You can see how it impacted everything right up to stuff like Medium. Medium is a great example of emphasis on typography in web layout. So Medium is, anybody familiar with Medium? Everybody familiar with Medium? Okay, so I won't give you the background, but they spent a lot. So actually, what you may not know about Medium is that it was designed by Tian Lax in Toronto. So they worked very closely with Obvious Corp on the design of this. It's iterated a little bit since then, but they were actually the designers behind this. And actually a great example, I don't know if everyone here knows Tian Lax, they're out in Liberty Village. They do really, really great work. And their website has these really nice stories on it, things we've made. So actually, back to the earlier question about unique selling proposition or unique value proposition. What does Tian Lax do? Right. Right. That's actually the whole page. There's nothing past there. That's it. Right. Now you can get into here and you can read the story about Medium and what they did. They did a really nice job of building out this. This is a long page. You see the scroll bar? We've got a long way to go, but it's compelling. They tell the story, right? This was the tweet that started the relationship that led to them designing Medium from Ev. You can read the whole story about how they did this. Some of the prototypes that they designed to experiment with different ideas. This one is actually one of the first ones they did, and it's been such a successful format for them that they've kept building these case studies, and the case studies have got more visual. This one's not actually loading entirely. There's a lot more pictures in here normally. There we go. So nice big pictures. They've done some nice design work around to support that. Also, always rule out QR codes. Yeah, anyway, I'm a big fan of the way that they present their stories. It's worth going through these and thinking about it.
I've mentioned these to a few of you because this is so hot right now with everything that you know style.
Yes.
Like, I would love a case study of HackerYou. That's like this kind of thing and the story of how that happened. And other companies would too, essentially this being a are in terms of how technology companies and other kinds of companies play products, things like that. I think like building something like this as a portfolio piece and showing things that you can do a case study for would be really cool.
So I think this one's actually my favorite of them for a bunch of reasons. One of them is even just in the scrolling, it actually explains exactly what this project is. So the social portraits allowed you to upload a picture and then connect your social sites and then have it pull together a heat map of words and turn those words into the picture. So that's exactly what that just did. Yeah, fish. That's what they produce, or things like that. That one is that was their inspiration, right? Yeah, they do such a great job, even in just the simplicity of showing that it's one color. I love the way they did the scrolling here. So you kind of pick up those pixels, and then it explains exactly how the algorithm works. And you can feel the pressure of the deadline approaching, right? Anyway, great stuff on their site. Right. Yeah. This picture that they keep using, it's kind of an inside joke. That's John and Jeff. This was their Christmas card one year, based on the movie Step Brothers, I think it was. Anyway. Yeah, it's a great point that for some businesses, they don't get business because of their website. In the case of a company like TN Lex, they've built a great reputation for themselves. They get business because people know who they are and they get referrals, or they're very active on social media and somebody connects to them like Ev did over Twitter. They don't get business because people are searching for the services they offer on Google. That won't be true for a lot of smaller clients, but it may be true for some of the bigger ones. Then the website actually acts as validation. It's not the primary way of getting business, but it's the thing that people are going to look up to see whether this is a company they want to work with. In our case, for example, the average size of our projects is so big that nobody hires us because they Googled a health marketing agency and found our services. But after we've gone in and pitched them, they go to our website to validate it. And so you might end up designing a website that supports pitch material rather than a website that leads to pitch material. And in that case, you have to make sure that you're telling a consistent story. Whatever the pitch was and whatever people said when they were in their pitching, the website has to reflect. So it's almost the second step in the conversion funnel rather than being the first step where you're attracting clients. It might actually be the second step where you're validating the business. That's why considering the audience is so critical.
So is this kind of immersive thing something that's new and growing, or I don't really come across it very much. That's why I was really surprised that I kind of see.
It is growing, and I think it's growing for a few reasons. The technologies at our disposal are getting more mature. We used to be able to build stuff like this in Flash, but it was so heavy and slow and required such a big connection that you didn't get a ton of it. The tools are getting much better. Even Adobe's tools are actually catching up to being able to produce sites like this through their tools. Most of these, certainly the Tianlax stuff is just hand-coded, but the tools, the publishing tools are actually catching up to being able to build this kind of stuff. The audience is there now. In the early days of the web, there wasn't nearly as big an audience. Now everybody is on the web, so you get a lot more, a broader content audience that can consume this stuff. Long-form pieces on the web are making a big comeback. For a long time, it looked like they were just going to disappear and everything was going to get to the level of 140 characters. Blogs used to play a much bigger place in the content world than they do now. These days, blog comments have fallen off almost entirely unless you're a really big blog. People used to interact all the time in the comment threads. Now they tweet about the blog. So the interaction has moved. But sites like Medium are bringing back long form. The New York Times piece, even this is long form. It's not journalism or content, but it's long form case study. And it can be really effective content if people want to read it. You think about how long this page is. The risk-reward decision of, should I bother reading this entire thing? There's a heavy risk on the time you're going to put into it. But if you're thinking of hiring Tianlax, you're going to read all of these. And they've served their purpose from that perspective. So yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more of this. The parallax scrolling effects that you see, like the ones that they're doing here around sort of how the animations work and that kind of stuff, you're seeing a lot more of them. In fact, it's kind of getting to the point now where I run across sites that don't do something when you scroll and it almost feels like they're old-fashioned. But you can get way too heavy on this stuff as well, and it'll slow way down unless you're on a really fast machine. So judicious use of it, it can be very effective. I think typing random URLs into a browser in front of a classroom is probably not the best idea. Trippy just redesigned. So Trippy's pretty cool. It's if you're planning to go somewhere, like let's say I was planning a trip to Barcelona, so I can sign up here and it'll look through my social network to find people I know who have been there, and then it'll ask them for advice for me and feed it back to me. So I'm actually getting recommendations from people I know or people who know people I know about things to do. But this is a really nice site in that they kept it really simple, but it has that really nice, I mean, again, beautiful photography, but they kept it really simple, has that nice parallax effect. You get this feeling of depth behind the white parts, like there's a whole world of travel right behind this website, which is exactly what the website is. So that's a really nice experience with the parallax that doesn't take it, really to a crazy level. Another good example, the iPad app, Paper, not the Facebook one, 43? Random numbers. 53. So if you have iPads and you haven't played with this, it's awesome. It's one of my favorite apps on the iPad. But I love what they did when they launched Pencil. So they created a stylus that works really well with their own app. It works with other apps on the iPad as well, but it works really well with their app because their app knows you're using their stylus and it has some corrections built in when you're using it that would otherwise be annoying. Like it's actually aware when you put your hand down on the screen and you're using the stylus not to read your hand as a touch, only to read the stylus. But they did a really nice thing here. Oh, you know what? They've changed the page. No, there it is. So the parallax actually pulls the stylus apart into pieces. So you can see all of the things that make up the stylus. So, that kind of use is great. It uses it as part of the experience, not just from there. You're actually turning the stylus through the scrolling. These things are not, if you plan that out really well, they're not particularly expensive to build. There's some great JavaScript libraries for doing the parallax effect, so you don't have to hand code everything yourself. Again, great photography of the device and all the component parts, but that's pretty doable. Do you remember what it was? So probably lead to it.
Hi, this is Christian Cantrell,
Oh,
and
this
I
was
just wanted to show you a
the
project.
tree. Yeah, but you can look at the tree thing without. Yeah, I think it might be this. Nope. It was for a show. It was to promote a show.
My team at Adobe's been working on using some content that was generously provided to us by National Geographic. Before I start showing you the demo, though, I want to point out that I'm using Chrome Canary here. So if you want to check this out on your own, you'll need to grab Chrome Canary and enable a couple of runtime flags. So what you'll do is go to Chrome Flags and scroll down here to a couple of features. You'll need to enable experimental WebKit features and enable CSS shaders. So just click on the enable links, relaunch the browser,
I'm pretty sure,
and you're all set.
that
So
I
back to the
actually
demo
looked at
here.
this
As I start to
code.
scroll down, we'll see the article
And
kind of
it
transition
didn't-
in here.
it didn't
The first
need it
thing we'll
anymore.
see is this drop cap. And if you look carefully, you'll see that this is an actual drop cap in the sense of the text actually following the contour.
I mean, if you can run immersive, I think it's contacted them because they wanted really good.
Proof of concept, yeah. Yeah, I think that, exactly, yeah. I mean, Adobe wants to show off their latest publishing technologies, so they would reach out to National Geographic and offer to build it to them for free. But something like the Killing Kennedy site, they may have hired an outside agency, but they probably just have an in-house team that's building this stuff. They have to promote the content so that people come and watch the shows. So
It's I thought it's not in Flash.
yeah, it's definitely not Flash. The easiest way to check for Flash, if you don't know, is just to right-click. If it's Flash, you'll get a Flash-specific memory. If it's not menu, if it's not Flash, you'll just get the browser's menu. If you're curious, you can also, in Chrome or in Firefox, see the underlying code in the developer tools, and you can actually see what the JavaScript's changing as you're scrolling. Back in the day when I started, we used to view source on websites, and you could just read the source because it made perfect sense. It's definitely not true anymore because you have so many different elements floating on top of each other and being animated, and most of what's happening is actually in CSS files or in JavaScript. It's much harder to pull a site apart like that, but you can still do it. Yeah. I can hang around with it. Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Dave.
Sure.
Yeah.